I like biggest and best. What's the best place to get French fries in Santa Monica? Who's the best mayor ever of Charleston, South Carolina? Biggest and best. And history. Has there ever been an MOU that's been more widely discussed than this one? In the history of MOUs, has there ever been one? Maybe not. There aren't that many MOUs. A lot of treaties get discussed. Although I wonder what's the most discussed treaty of all time. Anyway, these questions will not be answered tonight, but we will talk about the MOU. We'll talk about J.D. Vance and whether he's on the side of the people and elites are missing the point, or whether he's ending any presidential ambitions he might have. I know very smart people who think both things. I don't know. But we have very smart guests tonight. We have some great sound from the president, from the vice president, from the next president, Ted Cruz. That's a joke, ladies and gentlemen, although maybe he will be. Steve Cortes is here. I believe his first time on the program, but couldn't be happier to have him here. And Steve has a great piece in the Daily Signal writing about polling data from our friends at WIC. WIC polls are so good. I'll walk a mile to read a WIC poll. And so we'll talk about that. And it's about Hispanic voters, which really could end up being so key in the midterms and the next presidential. Donald Trump seems to have been given back some of the gains he's made and the party's made with Hispanic voters. I'm not interested in the reflecting pool. I don't know why. Maybe some of you think we should be talking about it, but maybe we will, but I doubt it. But we might talk about the new Air Force One. Let's start with that. Let's get everybody revved up. Before I ask any people to raise hands, before I bring in our guests, let's get everybody revved up. Take a look at this. This is the new Air Force One with some patriotic music. Number 24, please.
Ladies and gentlemen, the 45th and 47th President of the United States, Donald J. Trump.
And I'm proud to be an American, where at least I know I'm free. And I won't forget the men who died, who gave that right to me. And I gladly stand up next to you and defend her still today. 'Cause there ain't no doubt I love this land. God bless the USA. From the lakes of Minnesota to the hills of Tennessee.
All right. Whatever. We're not seeing enough of the plane. Well, there's some still photos of it. It's a beautiful plane. I don't love planes as much as Donald Trump does, but I've always been embarrassed as an American how crappy Air Force One is. I say, having ridden on it, and no, reporters can't file live off of Air Force One, let alone like stream video. It's nuts. I mean, what kind of country are we? Anyway, I hope this new Air Force One has a lot of capabilities. And I can't say I'm the biggest fan of all the ties between the United States and Qatar, because they're a sponsor of terrorism. It's just the craziest thing. We have a base there. We let them negotiate this Iran deal, and they're just completely double dealers. And I know there are people in this administration, others who say, well, we got to deal with them. But I don't know. I'd rather take the plane from almost anybody than them. But we have, and it's beautiful. And I'm glad we have an upgraded plane for whoever the president is. Anyway, our guests will be here. We'll talk a lot about the MOU and what's going on there. There's the new Plattner video. You like a good Plattner video? There's a new Plattner video. We'll show you that. And in any event, towards the end of the program, we'd be delighted to take your questions and comments. That's the two-way way. So if you're here on the platform and like to be in on the conversation, I'd ask that you raise your hand. Raise it high, keep it up electronically, and we'll get to you before too long. And there may be some news that I break during the show. Didn't tell the producers, didn't want to get their hopes up. But I'm waiting for a second confirmation on a piece of news. I could be the kind of person who just go with it on one, but I don't want to do that because I'm not sure the first source is right. It's someone with a mixed record of being right. So we'll stand by on that again. And I don't want to sound overly provocative or teasing folks, but I like to be transparent here, and we may break some news for you here during the show. I got a couple poly markets to show you. And the vice president on his book tour did another interview. Allie Beth Stuckey. I'm warning our guests now. I'm going to ask you your views of Allie Beth Stuckey. Maybe you don't have them. Maybe you do and you'll lie and say you don't. But in any event, we'll talk about her interview with the vice president in a moment. Our guests will be here in just a second. Let me get a sponsorship out of the way so our guests don't have to sit there and listen on camera. Cozy Earth, our great sponsor, will give you 20% off everything on the site with the promo code two-way. whether you want to buy yourself some soft new sheets, so nice that my friend Fred Davis travels with a set of the sheets and strips the hotel beds and puts them on there. The bubble cuddle blanket. I'm not saying my son couldn't sleep without his bubble cuddle blanket, but basically now he's addicted to it. And then, of course, the pants. The pants are, I'll say I'm addicted to them. I'm wearing them tonight when I go out to a concert. The Everywhere pant will be the most comfortable pair of pants you've ever owned. All the stuff comes with hassle-free returns. The clothing has a lifetime warranty. The sleep bedding stuff, 100-day return policy and a 10-year guarantee. I recommend it all. Go to cozyearth.com. Use the promo code two-way for 20% off. Again, our exclusive code for 20% off is two-way. And in the post-purchase survey, say loud and proud, you heard about Cozy Earth right here on Two-Way Tonight with me. All right, ladies and gentlemen, one of those nights when one of our guests is a returning Jeopardy champion and the other has never been here and probably has never even seen the show. We'll see about that in a minute. Returning Jeopardy champion Steve Olikara, my colleague from the group chat and former statewide candidate in Wisconsin and Democratic strategist. Stephen, welcome back. Great to see you.
Yeah, great to see you. Thanks for having me.
How do you feel? Just give me like your one sentence feeling currently about the MOU. Good, bad, indifferent?
Bad, but we need to get to peace as quickly as we can too.
Yeah. All right. Well said. We'll talk more. Steve Cortes is here. Some people call him Cordo. I've never found out if he likes that nickname or not. Steve's never been here. Steve, introduce yourself to the community. Tell everybody, unmute and tell everybody, you know, what was the long and winding road that found you here on Two-Way Tonight.
You bet, Mark. Thanks for having me. But by the way, about time you invited me. I had you on my show plenty of times previously back when I was hosting. So, okay.
True.
You know,
Yeah.
Not that I'm miffed. No, I'm very pleased to be here. And I've seen how well your platforms, plural, are doing. I see your clips all over my social media. So it's a thrill to be here. For folks out there who maybe don't know who I am, I'm a talking head on TV quite a lot. I also do a lot of polling. Strategy. I'm a campaign guy, starting with Trump 2016, campaign 2020, worked officially for the president in both of those races. I worked for outside groups in 2024. I also directed media for J.D. Vance in 2022 in his Senate campaign. So I'm a campaign animal and very involved in some key midterm races for this fall.
Very grateful to being here. You guys know each other at all?
I don't believe we've met, but
so.
it's always dangerous to have two Steves on at the same time.
That's right.
It is. It is. You'll know from the inflection in my voice. In any event, I couldn't be more delighted to have you both here and Steve Cortes to welcome you in. And again, as always, we'll take your questions, so please raise your hand. We'll get to you before too long. Let me try to summarize the day. It's not much different from where we were at the morning meeting, although there is a peace deal ostensibly between Israel and Lebanon. There's not a lot of withdrawal of forces, and right now there's no indication of when the talks might occur between the United States and Iran in Switzerland. The Swiss are all excited about being involved, and J.D. Vance's bags are packed, but at this hour, no indication of when the talks are on. Here's a headline from the New York Times about the deal, number 3. It's kind of a funny one. Iran's supreme leader says he dislikes the deal with the U.S., but allowed it. I don't know what it means to be the supreme leader if you have to allow something you dislike. The Ayatollah distanced himself from the agreement, putting responsibility for it on Iran's president, and says it does not mean acceding to U.S. demands. So there's a theory, Steve Cortes, there's a theory that J.D. Vance and Witkoff and Kushner have these side deals with the Iranians, and that they had to make the MOU look like it was pro-Iran because otherwise it couldn't pass through the supreme leader and others. And in fact, the deal's much better for the U.S. than the language in the MOU suggests. Do you buy that? Is that a possibility, probability in your eyes?
Oh, I think it's certainly a possibility, but no, I wouldn't say it's probable that that's the reality. Look, the way I look at this is the best of bad options right now. And why do we face bad options? Well, because our strategy, frankly, did not work, right? We believed and hoped, I guess, that we could decapitate the regime, that we could effect regime change through a massive blitzkrieg air war. That didn't work. I thought it was foolish from the get-go because it defied logic, it defied history. That's not how regimes, particularly very entrenched regimes, go down. And once that didn't work, to a degree, we were stuck, right? Because we were stuck in a war that the American people clearly did not support. But at the same time, it's important to, of course, leave with some sense of honor, both because of the optics, but also because of the substance of letting Iran know, hey, we can come back. We can inflict pain upon you again. So to me, it's imperative. And I'll tell you, as a campaign guy, as a pollster, there is no broad support among the American populace for another Mideast war, for an entrenched, elongated Mideast war. Certainly no support for an invasion to affect regime change. And if that's the case, then we have to deal with the bad hand that we presently have. And I think this is probably the best deal we can do given that reality.
Steve, I have to say, in all honesty, that's one of the clearest and most honest explanations of where we were, where we are now, that I've heard from any Republican. I couldn't be more grateful to you for laying it out the way you did. And before we get to Stephen, as opposed to Steve, why can't the administration say some version of that? Why can't they say, we tried our best to make this work, but it came up short in some ways, and therefore we've got to settle this? Why can't they say that? Because, of course, what the president says is we won easily. We annihilated them. He told Mark Caputo this is akin to surrender. Why can't they say that? Maybe that's a naive question, but why can't they say that?
Well, Mark, look, I mean, when it comes to President Trump, hyperbole has served him well throughout his life, not just in politics, right? In his pre-political career. And in general, I really believe he takes this Dale Carnegie approach to life of if we say it, we will make it so, right? And again, it has often worked for him, and it's often worked in politics, and he's defied his critics many times. In this case, though, the brutal reality is it is not working. And even if you think it can work with enough military might, and certainly the United States has the raw power to accomplish what it wants to do, but it doesn't have the support of the American people. And I think we have to remember the American people now have been dealing with 5 years of inflation that they cannot handle. Now, I think most of the blame for that inflation clearly lies with Joe Biden. But the reality is, with the Republicans as the governing party right now, and the American people really, really anxious, to say the least, just ticked off royally right now by every measure, there is simply not the well of public support to engage in a sustained struggle. So to me, the administration took a shot. I thought it was ill-advised from the start, but okay, they took a strategic shot in saying, can we do this quickly? Can we do this with an enormous projection of American power and topple this awful regime? And they are awful. But once that didn't work, we've got to find a way to get to the exit. And I think this is the best way to get to the exit. And by the way, it might well save Republican chances for the fall. And that's not unimportant in this equation, right? So to me, as a campaign guy, if the peace holds, we'll see, big if, but if it does, I think the Republicans get back to a fighting chance in terms of the House, hopefully, easily keeping the Senate and hopefully building momentum into 2028.
Steve, just so to my ears, just so brilliant and accurate. Stephen, annotate what Steve said, please.
I'm surprised how much I'm agreeing with Steve's framing of the Iran situation. I'm not sure how the midterms will play out, but I do think I've really no annotations to what Steve said in terms of Iran. And like you said, Mark, we're not hearing that kind of clear-mindedness from a lot of the key administration leaders and Republican leaders, probably because it just admits that they didn't think this through as much as they should have. And what you're seeing with this tentative agreement is essentially trying to get us back to an economic status quo, which is the Strait of Hormuz being open in exchange for what J.D. Vance calls benefits, economic benefits. He has to use that word so it doesn't sound like their framing of the Obama deal, which was giving economic benefits to the Iran regime. People should know they're kind of doing the same thing in terms of unfreezing assets and lifting sanctions. So yeah, it's a terrible deal, and there are only bad options at this point. I think a lot of what has played out would have been very predictable. If you talk to national security experts, you talk to people who play out these different scenarios, all of this was predictable, and it's stunning. Now, what's interesting with the deal too is Trump doesn't really have a natural constituency of support for this. Democrats are against it. Pro-Israel community is against it. The military-industrial complex is against it. So there's really no source of support for what Trump is trying to do here.
Yeah, well said. Brilliantly said by both of you. Let me run through some news. First of all, this makes me laugh. This is a Washington Post headline, number 4, please. U.S. intelligence warns Israel is likely to undermine Iran peace deal, officials say. Ladies and gentlemen, I don't know how much we paid for that intelligence, but I could tell you that without any reporting. Here's Bibi Netanyahu talking about Israel hitting Hezbollah, number 11, please. Sorry, you can stop it. I thought Bibi talked that. That's just a video he shared. That's a video of Israel hitting various Hezbollah targets. So that's going to continue, and I really do wonder if Iran will ever get to the table with the U.S. because every time the Israelis read about J.D. Vance headed to Andrews Air Force Base, they could just drop a bomb on Hezbollah, and if Hezbollah wants to do the same thing, they can just launch an attack on Israel, which again is where all this starts. Here's the President Andrews, Joint Base Andrews, talking to my colleagues about the 60-day clock. Again, the Vice President said the clock started on Thursday, and talks aren't going to start any sooner than Sunday. So we've used up, I'm horrible at math, but we've used up like a 20th of the time minimum. Here's the President Andrews talking about the 60 days. Number 5, please.
I would say equal. And now we have an agreement that was signed last night, and it's 60 days. They have to make a deal, otherwise we will do things that won't make them happy. But I don't think it's going to get to that. I think it's going to be very good. Remember, if we do that, then all of a sudden you're not going to have the oil flowing out of the strait too quickly, because people that own billion-dollar ships don't love missiles flying over them, don't love mines all over the water. And this is going to be amazing what's happening now, because we have the greatest economy that we've ever had. We have $19.2 trillion coming into our country.
Okay, Ted Cruz kept up his criticism today of the deal on his podcast with our friend Ben Ferguson. Here's Senator Cruz talking about this is his strong negative views about the deal. Number 16, please.
This agreement contemplates billions of dollars flowing into the IRGC's coffers. And I'll say something else also.
Can we also just say this, too, that people understand IRGC? They're basically running the country right now.
If the Islamic regime remains in power, that regime, I believe, will continue to threaten President Trump and his family forever.
Yeah.
That is, that they've twice hired hitmen to try to murder the president. I believe the Ayatollah with $300 billion, I think the result of that would be more Americans killed in terrorism. And I also, this regime, they lie. So, yes, they've promised not to develop nuclear weapons. If they get $300 billion, they will use that money to develop nuclear weapons.
Well, no, they couldn't lie in the context of a gentleman's agreement. We know that. Anyway, a few more things. Here's a poly market, number 17. Will Strait of Hormuz traffic return to normal by July 15th? That's in just under a month. 26% chance, according to poly market wagers. And will Israel and Lebanon normalize relations before the end of this year? Number 18, please. Will there be normal relations? 23% chance. So there's a question of whether the talks get going, and if so, what happens in them? And of course, there's a question of what happens between Israel and Hamas. Stephen, where do you think this goes in the next week? What do you think will happen between the U.S. and Iran in the next week?
I think we're going to continue to see more delays like the one we're seeing today. J.D. Vance is supposed to be on a plane, right? Or already arrived potentially to Switzerland. And so that's getting, they said that's due to logistical issues. The logistical issues is that they're not together on this. They're not agreeing enough on where this needs to go. And so I think there'll continue to be delays. And during that time, there's very fertile ground for more attacks, more missiles to be launched, more instability, more ships in the Strait of Hormuz potentially to be a target by Iran, especially Iranian drones. So I think we continue to see delay. I can't imagine a week from now that they've actually signed this. And keep in mind, this is supposed to be the temporary arrangement, essentially kind of buying them 60 days to actually figure out details. So I think even this intermediate piece is going to get delayed.
So can I give the optimistic case, Mark?
Yes, sir. Please
here,
do.
and counter my new friend Stephen. I am optimistic that we're going to get to a deal because I think the incentives are there for all sides, at least the Iranian and the U.S. side. In terms of the Iranians, they're being offered an opportunity to reintegrate effectively with the world. Now, they have to behave themselves, of course, and there's always this sort of Damocles that the U.S. at any time can unleash military fury upon them. However, I think that's very enticing to them, particularly to a new leadership. I mean, remember, we killed almost everyone of any consequence and power. So to these new leaders who now reign there, I think that's probably very tantalizing to them to say, hey, we can do something that Iran couldn't do before this conflict. And yes, there was a lot of suffering along the way, a lot of our people killed, our colleagues killed. However, we can reintegrate with the world, sell oil, do things that are important for the regime. On the U.S. side, in terms of the incentives, I firmly believe that President Trump and his team are very aware that we do not want to celebrate the 250th birthday of the United States on July 4th while we are still engaged in a hot, unpopular war in the Middle East. So I really believe that. Now, that you might say, though, as a foil, well, what about Israel? They don't have either of those incentives, right? They don't want Iran reintegrated. They don't really care about the 4th of July in the United States. But thankfully, we have a lot of leverage on Israel, right, in various ways, particularly financially, intelligence-wise, other ways. So I am optimistic that, again, I don't think this is a great deal by any stretch. The opposite. I think it's the best of really bad options because, again, our strategy didn't work. And when your strategy doesn't work, whatever it is in life, right, well, then you have to say, okay, from here, what's possible? And I'd like to also just respond to that Ted Cruz point there, where Ted Cruz says the new Ayatollah is going to be a bad guy or is a bad guy. Of course he is. But guess what? We killed the old Ayatollah, and did it work? No, it did not. There is a new Ayatollah. So I would say to Ted Cruz, what is your plan? Probably invade Iran? Well, let me tell you something. The American people have zero appetite for that. Okay, we are not invading and conquering. We're not doing another Iraq. There is absolutely no tolerance for that kind of nonsense. And to those maximalists like Ted Cruz and Lindsey Graham, a lot of them are Republicans, of course, that would be okay, what is your plan? Because if your plan is invade, is regime change, that's absurd. And it serves maybe the interests of Israel, but it doesn't serve the interests of the United States, and the American people won't have it, especially at a time when they're already unhappy with their own economic stress.
Steve, again, I'll just say you're saying more sense than I hear from almost any Republican on this topic. You're really clear-headed and straight on, and your critiques of the whole thing are quite impressive, truly.
Thank you.
I'm going to read you a quote, and I'm going to give you three choices. You guys will guess who said it. Who said it, right? If everything is Jew hatred, nothing is Jew hatred. Was it A, Barry Weiss, B, Tucker Carlson, or C, J.D. Vance? Stephen.
B,
Tucker Carlson.
Carlson.
Okay. Steve?
Well, I watched it, so I know. This is J.D. Vance.
J.D. Vance. Okay. We'll play it in a second. It's quite a quote, and it continues a third news cycle where the vice president is saying things that I believe are largely popular in the United States, not popular with a lot of American Jews or Israelis, not popular with a lot of the donors in the Republican Party, and probably popular with the president, his boss. Before we go to the sound, Steve, who is Allie Beth Stuckey?
She is a podcaster. She's an evangelical woman with a very popular following, especially among that world, evangelicals, largely females. I actually listen to her show a lot, even though it's, I find it to be mostly feminine geared, but she's so good and so smart that even as a guy, I still find it really valuable. So I think really highly of her. And on the sort of conservative Christian right, she really has a strong following. She's young, she's dynamic, good looking, good broadcaster. And I thought it was a fascinating interview. She's definitely more pro-Israel, or more sort of, pro-U.S. alignment with Israel than JD is. But it was a really thoughtful conversation. It wasn't just that sort of dumb Ted Cruz, like, well, if you don't believe what I believe, then you're an anti-Semite. It was a much more nuanced, smart conversation in my view.
Well said, both your description of her and your characterization of the interview. She's an extremely good broadcaster, and she's a massive following, and because that's the business I'm in. I'm in awe of how she's built up her following. Here is the vice president, a soundbite that includes the now immortal line, if everything is Jew hatred, nothing is Jew hatred. Number 12, please.
Semitic. And so I do think that sometimes, advocates of Israel or pro-Israel people in the United States make two critical mistakes. One, on the one hand, is not delineating between America's interests and Israeli interests, because they're not always the same. But the second is always conflating criticism of a particular government with Jew hatred. Because if everything is Jew hatred, then nothing is Jew hatred. I actually think Jew hatred is very bad, which is why I think we have to be very careful about not calling it's kind of like how progressives for 20 years called everything racist. And if everything is racism, nothing is racism.
I'll say again, I've said this all week. I have people in my life who I respect saying with JD Vance's role in all of this, including his criticism of Israel, has ended whatever chance he had to ever be president. And I have people in my life who say this is so brilliant politically that it's going to help him with where public opinion is within the party and within MAGA. And of course, it can't all be reduced, shouldn't all be reduced to what this might do to his presidential campaign prospects. These are extraordinary things for a vice president of the United States to be saying. And I don't say extraordinary in a freighted way. They're just positive or negative. These are extraordinary things to be said. And the point that I quoted now and that you heard him say, if everything is Jew hatred, nothing is Jew hatred, is something that I have fought with in a peace, love, and understanding way with many people in my life about Mayor Mondami and about JD Vance. Do not call someone anti-Semitic if they haven't done something that warrants that. You might disagree with it. You might think it's not sympathetic enough to Israel, et cetera, but you cannot turn everything that's oppositional to what Bibi Netanyahu wants into anti-Semitism. You cannot. Here's more of the vice president with Ali Beth Stuckey talking about Israel. Number 13, please.
Israel has an outsized influence in the U.S.
Well, I certainly think that Israel, like a lot of other countries, tries to influence American politics. I sort of take that as a given. And what I think is that American leaders have to be very careful that when we pursue something, we're doing it for America's best interest and not for any other country's best interest. And if you go back, let's say, to World War II, there were these extraordinarily strong disagreements between General Eisenhower and General Montgomery about military strategy. Those disagreements are a natural part of having a partner. And I do think that sometimes, like, the opinion that I disagree with is, on the one hand, people will say that America's interests are always aligned with Israel's interests. It's just not true. And I see this every day in the conversations that we have and the back and forth. And obviously, the president has been very clear. He's got some disagreements with Bibi Netanyahu about how precisely to bring the Iran war to a close. And then I think there are some people who will say that Israel's interests are never aligned with America's, and I think that's also not true. I think the reality is they're a good partner in the same way that the United Kingdom or France are good partners. That doesn't mean that we're always going to have aligned interests.
I'm not a spokesperson for the vice president, and it's not like I think he walks on water, but man, is he a smart person. I mean, I just don't understand people's rejection of him without factoring in. He is just... His brain is just massive. I have said before, the absence of Charlie Kirk right now on this issue is gigantic. The implications of the lack of Charlie Kirk here as a voice on the national town square, but as also as someone trying to deal with the different factions within the conservative movement. Here's the vice president talking about his friend, Charlie Kirk, on Israel, number 14, please, also with Ali Beth Stuckey.
Look, sometimes criticism of Israel bleeds into Jew hate. It just does. Charlie was very aware of this. By the way, Charlie was very worried about Israeli influence in American politics. He also really disliked anti-Semitism. But in the same way that sometimes criticism of the Israeli government can be expressed in a way that's anti-Semitic, it's just not the case that every criticism of Bibi Netanyahu's policy decisions leads to anti-Semitism.
I'll say again, if you disagree with the vice president's position on Israel, do not jump to calling him an anti-Semite. It's a mistake. Engage with him on specifics of policy, but do not jump to that. Okay, big setup there for you, Steve, who knows the vice president. What do you think? What do you think this is all about? Is he carrying water for the president, saying things that even the president can't say? Is he seizing the moment to send a message to Israel to keep them from trying to scuttle the deal? What is up with all of this? Because these are extraordinary things to be saying.
They are, yes, and certainly very atypical for a vice president, right? Who usually deals in generality and vagueness, right? And maybe some niceties. So very, very different. I mean, this is very serious conversation and analysis. And Mark, you mentioned you are not a spokesman for the vice president. I have been a spokesman for him. So I want to first just, as a disclaimer, provide that to the audience, that information, that I'm very biased in his favor. I think so highly of him personally and professionally, and I want him to be the next president, and I think he will be. So, but with that disclaimer, let me say that I think he is having a brilliant week. I mean, his conversations on Israel, on his book, on politics in general, on his life, his faith, have been, to me, just insanely impressive, whether in friendly settings or really hostile settings. And specifically to answer your question, though, regarding this, what I think he's doing here, and I think he does it as well as anybody, maybe anybody out there right now, because Charlie Kirk sadly is no longer with us, is he can dive into the nuance in a way that isn't boring, right? And that nuance in this case of saying you can be very skeptical of Netanyahu. You can be very skeptical of the U.S. alliance with Israel. That does not in any way intrinsically make you anti-Semitic. And that most people who are anti-Semitic will also hate Israel. Yes, there is that bucket. However, if you are skeptical of Israel or skeptical of our alliance and the intensity of our alliance with Israel, in no way should that automatically paint you as somehow bigoted. And I think he makes a great point there too. And we should assume as Americans, like, let's be adults, okay? We're the most powerful country in the world with a military that can destroy the world, right? So when you are that kind of a country, that kind of economy and military, every country on earth is trying to influence you, right? Of course they are. Friend and foe. And Israel, though, is probably better at it than other countries for various reasons that influence the United States. To point out that influence is in no way acting in some prejudicial manner. Instead, I view it as the opposite. It's saying, hey, we as American nationalists, whatever our religion, whether it's Catholic or Jewish or no religion, when it comes to public policy, our aim, our first priority should be nationalist. It should be defending the interests of the United States and an adult realization that every country is trying to influence us. And in this recent crisis, perhaps Israel has influenced us to a degree that has caused us harm. That would be what I would say has been the case.
Can I add to?
Yeah, I just want to set up with you this way. There are people in your party, Mayor Mondami, followers of Bernie Sanders, et cetera, and many members of this community who are Democrat, liberal, progressive Democrats, who would agree wholeheartedly with what the vice president's saying. So this is popular not just with some parts of MAGA. This is popular with a lot of Americans. Stephen.
Exactly. That's exactly what I was going to say. Is you hear many Democrats speaking this exact point about criticizing the Netanyahu government. It's not anti-Semitic. It's dangerous into that rhetorical territory. And so this does have cross-political appeal. And I agree with Steve that I think what JD is doing in a situation like this is he's getting into the nuance without getting boring. And that's a very important skill of political communication. That's a skill he's really always had. I first met him, I think, in 2017 before his sort of pro-MAGA reinvention. But he definitely still had those skills at that time. And so, I think it's interesting that his book launch just happened to coincide with him being the lead Republican administration official on this Iran deal. So he's just out there a lot, both trying to sell books and trying to sell this deal. And that's just interesting. I do think, Mark, that he is filling some of that void that Charlie Kirk left. I think JD is people do. And the final point I'll just make is our colleague Mark Bhatia Ungar Sargon, she's made the interesting point, the interesting question, I guess, that is JD Vance getting border czarred, making a reference to Kamala Harris and being sort of thrown into a undesirable vice presidential policy portfolio, which was the immigration and the border. Is that happening to JD Vance when he goes out and tries to sell a deal that's not popular right now?
If I can respond to that, though, Stephen, because I've seen that attack, that line of reasoning. I don't want to call it attack. That line of reasoning quite a bit. And I have tremendous respect for Bhatia, but I also think that I understand MAGA pretty well from my long experience in the movement, from my constant polling. I think I understand MAGA. And one of the foundations of MAGA is non-intervention, right? Is anti-war. Now, MAGA also so trusts Donald Trump concurrently that they're willing to give him a lot more leeway than they would other politicians regarding making war, right? But my point here is that accusing JD Vance, as it were, accusing him of making peace of ending an unpopular war is an interesting way to try to criticize him. I think, in fact, at least for the Republican primary, you are probably reinforcing him. And I can certainly tell you, I don't have polling data on this yet, of course, because he just got out there in this way. But anecdotally, I can certainly tell you within my world, within my sort of MAGA, America First, non-interventionist world, people are just beyond thrilled with J.D. Vance being sort of our spokesman out there and having such a such prominence, as you pointed out. He's out there a lot now, both in frequency and reach, and making these points. But I think, if anything, and I think some of the folks maybe who are attacking him and saying that he is being border czarred, they may not realize that at least within the Republican primary, this is probably strengthening him.
Yeah, and it's so amazing to my colleagues out of touch with American public opinion. There's different ways to ask about this, and it's not like it's a 90-10 issue, but not just within the Republican Party. This is a majority issue for the positions that J.D. Vance is taking, and you may not like that reality of some of you, but it is a majority opinion. And my colleagues are asking like this is some suicide mission, where he's making a massive mistake. Now, I do think that he's going to lose some donors off of this.
Yeah.
And I said this morning, no one has become the Republican nominee without being the Republican Jewish Coalition. What's their name? Adelson candidate. So maybe he can defy that. But even Donald Trump kissed this ring to get the nomination, and he's really doing himself some damage there, but not with the public necessarily. All right, let's talk politics for a little bit here, and then we'll go to your questions. Please raise your hand if you want to be part of the conversation in just a moment. Here's the president with the great Mark Caputo talking about the midterms. Number 19, please.
His party usually loses control of the House. His poll numbers usually start to decline, and he starts to weaken. And that's happening to you.
No, it's not. Fake polls. I have great poll numbers.
How do you maintain?
I would beat any candidate they have by 25 points.
Well,
No, he wouldn't. Steve, you'll back me up because you see so much data. The election's not today. November's not June. But if you go to Florida, Texas, Ohio, Iowa, just to pick 4 red states, and look at the president's approval rating, it's so far down that we're looking at competitive down ballot races on that variable alone. Correct?
Yes. Listen, there is work to do on the right, work to do on the Republican side, clearly. And, I think this is true from all credible public polling, including my own, by the way, and I'm certainly not trying to skew polls in any sense to the left. What I do want is an honest scientific assessment of where are the people and how can we move them? How can we persuade them? Now, I will also say this, particularly when you look at congressional ballot, just generic congressional ballot, Republicans are much closer than I would guess, given how mad the people are economically. In other words, those two things don't seem to jive for me. People are irate about the economy and overwhelmingly blame Republicans. But then at the same time, we've got really close margins when we say, are you going to vote D or R? The way I explain that, but I don't know this yet, and hopefully we'll find out by November, is that even though people are really ticked off at the Republicans, they also can't stand the radical Democrats. So in other words, the Republicans are blessed with really awful opponents, even though people are very angry with the governing Republicans. But look, there is wood to chop, is my point. Right now, President Trump is not popular. This economy is certainly not popular. I think that can get better fast, though. I think we were on a great trajectory pre-war. So if the war is in fact done, and if we get stability and prices down and stay down, then I think we get back to that economic trajectory and things can change. But also another reason why the clock is ticking and why I think there's such urgency to get to a deal, even if it's not a great deal, because what I just described in terms of an economic boom that makes people feel good enough in time for November, we don't have a lot of runway, right? And that runway is getting shorter by the day.
Yeah, perfectly said. The only thing I quibble with is some people say the runway has actually ended. It's too late. Here's Steve's Daily Signal piece, number 20, please. Steve works with our friends at WIC, who did our Maine poll this week that we did with them and helped us put the focus group we did together this week of Maine voters. New polling, Hispanics are angry at the economy, strong on immigration enforcement. 21, please. Again, this is Steve's piece now. When asked what concerns them more, high prices or immigration and customs enforcement and immigration enforcement, Hispanics cite inflation worries by a staggering 73% to 19%. The poll also found that Hispanics approved by an 11-point margin of removing illegal immigrants who refused the Trump administration's generous incentives for self-deportation, including paid trips home and the ability to reapply later for legal status. In addition, Hispanics support full cooperation between local police and federal immigration authorities by a 20% margin. Number 22, please, finally, from Steve's piece. At present, Trump's job approval among Hispanics sits at a dismal net minus 31%, with 30% approving, 61% disapproving on inflation. The news is even worse for the administration, with only 21% approval. Overall, just 15% of Hispanics say their financial situation has improved under Trump, while 54% say things have gotten worse. 15% of Hispanics say their financial situation has improved. We're looking at Senator Tallarico if those numbers sustain through November. I'll let Stephen go first, even though it's Steve's piece, and then Steve will talk more about what he wrote. Stephen, thoughts on the poll and how it's framed by Steve there?
Yeah, well, not just Senator Tallarico. You might see some more congressional seats and more folks ballot winning in Texas. Real quick on that, the Texas gerrymandering was partly based on an assumption that a somewhat favorable Hispanic support for the president based on the 2024 election results. But that's all shifting, as you see with the polling that Steve is talking about. It is about the economy. And I think for, any American who's looking at the higher cost of goods, that hurts. But I think there's the additional piece of this is a war of choice that is causing, it's a self-inflicted wound. We're causing these prices to go up. And I think that's even more offensive to a number of voters, including Hispanics.
The president's landed at Camp David during this hour while we've been on together, and he plans to spend the weekend there. Steve, flesh out what you reported and whether you think any of your friends in the White House or James Blair, anybody would take issue with that data.
Oh, I think they would take issue, but I think they also at least recognize privately that we do have a problem right now with Hispanics, because some of the most impressive gains, maybe the most impressive gains of the 2024 victory were among Hispanics. Trump won Hispanic men nationally. He nearly won Hispanics overall. He did incredibly well in places like Texas and South Florida, of course, among Hispanics. And I knew from all of my state polling that we were losing that support, but I said, you know what, we've got to do a national poll to find out exactly why. Because what the DC Republican operatives, what sort of the Washington establishment Republicans want us to believe is, it's about immigration. So let's get soft on immigration and we're going to get these Latinos back. I strongly suspected that was not the case, but I said, we got to test it rigorously. So went to WIC. They've done a lot of Hispanic polling and said, let's test this. Where are we on support? What are they mad about? Assuming they're angry. Well, they are angry, very angry right now at Republicans, at President Trump, but it's almost completely about the economy. Immigration is actually not even that important in terms of a priority to Hispanics. And by the way, I'm Hispanic. I'm an immigrant son. I will tell you anecdotally, I certainly see this in my world. The reality is Hispanics statistically, overwhelmingly, are working class people in this country. Hispanics are a full decade younger than non-Hispanic citizens, so they are younger and they are more blue collar, generally less credentialed. As working class people, the inflation hits them harder. That's just the reality right now. So even though I think we have a winning message for them on the whole, and we showed that in 2024, they're struggling right now. And one thing I will take issue with the Senator Tallarico, even if things don't improve, because one thing I also found in my poll is on cultural issues, Hispanics remain really traditional and conservative, especially Hispanic men. So the idea of a senator from Texas who believes that boys should be playing girls' sports, I believe is an impossibility. It's a roadblock for bad hombres. But of course, let's get the economy better and we don't even have to worry about winning on those other issues, is my message to Republicans.
Yeah, the folks, go ahead, Steve.
I think just on Steve's point about the working class and working class politics, I think Republicans over the last 5-6 years have done a really good job actually culturally aligning with the working class, which is why you saw those gains among Hispanics towards Trump in 2024. And I think one reason, as you pointed out earlier, Steve, that if you look at the generic ballot between Democrats and Republicans, you would expect Democrats to be doing even better than they are. And I think it is because the Democratic brand is still not tenable for enough working class Americans. It's still seen as the party of the elites. So even though the Trump administration is doing no favors to the working class right now because of the high cost of goods, Democrats culturally and just like branding wise have not successfully connected with the working class.
Yep. Ladies and gentlemen, you hear me say this on occasion. One of our taglines here is conversations like no other. These two gentlemen have given you an hour for 44 minutes, a better conversation than you'll hear anywhere on cable news or most other streaming shows. If you watch them for 2 weeks, and I'm so grateful to you both for just being so smart and well informed and clear headed. And again, peace, love, and understanding. And you're both members of your own parties, but you're just providing information, and couldn't be more grateful to you. And I hope the community appreciates it. I'm learning a ton here, and like I said, I could watch most cable for a month, and I wouldn't hear this level of sophistication and insight. So thank you both. Donald Trump does so many things that we accept now as normal. This isn't normal, but he's done it before. There's a new Truth Social post in the South Carolina gubernatorial runoff. The president previously endorsed the lieutenant governor, but now he's endorsing both candidates. So he's not withdrawing his endorsement from the lieutenant governor, but he's also now adding his backing to Alan Wilson. Both have had amazing careers. They've been with me from the beginning. They're MAGA and America First all the way. These were the two that I was hoping would get into the runoff, and they did. I can't hurt one of them by only endorsing the other. So therefore, I'm going to endorse the governor of South Carolina, both Pam Abbott and Alan Wilson. It's the wealth of riches. With neither one, you can't go wrong. Vote for Pam or Alan. They will not let you down. So as always, I wonder in these cases what happened behind the scenes, because obviously he's by not endorsing singularly the way he did in the initial round of voting, he's making an interesting choice. Anyway, let's go to the community. Please raise your hand if you want to get in the conversation. Unmute. Tell folks who don't know where you are and what's on your mind. And I will say, ladies and gentlemen, I love all members of the two-way community equally, but I love Yakov a little bit more because he did a very nice thing for me a couple weeks ago and allowed me to share in what has been for New York City just an incredible experience with the Knicks. So thank you again, sir, and welcome in, and tell folks what's on your mind.
Hi, thank you for taking my call. Steve, I'm a huge fan of yours, and I followed you for a long time.
Was that Steve or Steven?
Steven, Steven, I like. Yeah. Steve, I've been following. Okay. I'm a MAGA guy, so yeah.
Feel free to call him Cordo. Everybody does.
Yeah. So to say JD Vance is anti-Semite, I wish my mayor would be anti-Semite like JD is an anti-Semite. It's offensive and outrageous. So that's that. My argument is that American First is standing side by side with Israel. During the war with Iran, Israel was the only country that flew sorties with America. Israel had boots on the ground, rescuing the downed pilots. Israel had air bases in Iraq and Somaliland and Pakistan. I don't know how to pronounce it. Israel provided Iron Dome to UAE. Where were all the other Gulf nations? Where were all the other European allies? So that's my point. One point, and they also, Hezbollah is a huge threat to Israelis, and I think I just hope and wish that JD would express and recognize how dangerous Hezbollah is to Israel, and using Bibi as like somebody like you're gonna knock down, that's fine, but the Iran war and the war against Hezbollah is a 90%, 90-10 issue in Israel. It's not Bibi. You can take any prime minister, anybody in the government. That's the position of every Israeli. 90% is fighting against Iran and against Hezbollah. So I just wanted to maybe give that
those are
message to the vice president.
Those are two big thoughts. Thank you for that, Steve, and then Stephen.
So, Yakov, listen, I think you make an important point. The U.S.-Israeli partnership has been amazing for both countries for a very long time. I do understand and hear what you're saying on Hezbollah and Lebanon attacking. I think to put it in American terms, if we had missiles regularly coming up from Mexico, I think the American response would be absolutely brutal, and it should be, right? So I absolutely understand that. But regarding the partnership, I guess what I would also say is we are partners, we're not married, right? In other words, it doesn't mean that we always have the other's interest at heart. This is not a sacred covenant relationship where we must always act in alignment. And I think recently, particularly in the case of attack in Iran, I think Bibi had really bad analysis. And just as he did, by the way, with the Iraq War many years ago, he has been cajoling America to get involved, directly involved, kinetically involved in the Middle East for a very long time. And I think he's been mostly wrong. And by the way, you know who else, to this point of anti-Semitism, Bibi is not that popular right now in Israel. He's facing a very difficult re-election, right? One that right now, at least, I think he would probably lose. I think reasonable people would say, so are those Israelis anti-Semitic because they don't support Bibi right now? So, let's be aware of that nuance. I think also as Americans, that certainly we have every prerogative as Americans to say, hey, don't agree with this current Israeli government's policies, and that doesn't make me in any way bigoted.
100%, 100%. But it's not an Israeli government disagreeing with the Israeli government. It's a 90-10 issue in America. And I saw 2 weeks ago when I was in Israel how America and Israel are hip by hip when it comes to the military. Like I saw it in the highest offices of the Israeli government, how America is working together. So absolutely.
Stephen.
Yeah, all good points. Yeah, what shouldn't be lost in all of this as we try to have a more nuanced look at our partnerships in Israel in the region is that there's absolutely no partner like Israel in the Middle East. They're an essential ally, and it's not just because of economic or military partnerships, it's culturally and in terms of democracy. Israel's the only true multi-ethnic democracy in the region, and that is undeniable. And at the same time, and this is the points that we've been making, is the U.S. interest is not 100% the Israeli interest, and that's really shouldn't be a controversial thing to say. What's really interesting and something I'll be watching over the next few months is Trump's approval rating in Israel, because he's been generally very popular there, more popular than Netanyahu, and that has given him some significant leverage when it comes to these issues. Now, is his popularity going to shift? I don't know, but it'll be interesting to watch.
Yeah, Jakob, thank you so much. Great questions. 2 tweets I got to read you. First, Reagan Reese, great Daily Caller, White House correspondent, just tweeted this. I just toured the new Air Force One, no photos allowed, so I have to take my word for it. It's big and beautiful, like, quote, this feels more like a house than a big plane. Warm tan walls, glossy silver accents throughout, solid wood tables, presidential seal on every seat belt, couches in the lounge, photos of the National Mall in the conference room. Here's the best part. The press area is 2 to 3 times the size of the old planes. The seats recline all the way flat into beds. And yes, it has that new plane smell. So that's good for all of us, really. And then Mark Caputo, Barack Ravid, tweeted this, if I can find it quickly, about Secretary Rubio. He says, Rubio plans a trip to the Middle East next week, Kuwait, UAE, Bahrain at the moment, expected to hold a summit with the Gulf state foreign ministers in Bahrain. So in the category of what happens next, that appears to be a pretty big development. And of course, those who said there's some weird thing going on where Mark Rubio is trying to not be involved in this policy, trust me, folks, he's plenty involved. Matthew, also known as Maddie, thank you for being here. Tell everybody what's on your mind for Steve and Stephen.
Happy Friday and some great commentary. Thank you to Stephen and Steve. I agree. JD Vance is brilliant and he's very well spoken. But what scares me is that he's smart enough to know that some of the stuff he says just is simply not true. When he talks about kind of threatening cutting off Israel's arms, I would actually argue that a lot of pro-Israel people actually welcome that idea, because they would say that they've been held by America to not finish a war on their own.
Yeah.
So I think that he knows better, and that I would argue that all the money that the Iron Dome, everything, both sides want to have less military spending. Israel saves America so much money. Without that partnership, with cutting them off, it's only going to cost more money, more boots on the ground. We just had the B-2 training. So I think we see that whether we're at war or not, lives are spent, money is spent, and Israel avoids a lot of that spending. And Vance knows better, and that's what scares me about it.
Steve, thank you, Maddie. Steve.
Yes. So listen, I will defend JD Vance because I just know him to be such a man of principle. I think I know that personally, but I think from his public actions, it's evident as well. So when he says it, he means it. And regarding Israel, for sure, there have been enormous benefits for the United States, particularly on the technology side, because Israel is such a fantastic high-tech innovator. But the reality is there is a donor in this situation and there is a recipient. And there's no way to avoid that reality, right? And we continue to donate money to a very wealthy country. And I think it's reasonable to ask, is that in our national interest to effectively have a charity that is in many ways wealthier than the United States, that is a very sophisticated place? Does that make sense for us? Or should we be equal business partners in terms of national security?
Steven.
Just real quick,
Okay.
gotta say,
Yeah, go ahead.
we're not necessarily a donor. We spend that, we get money and we spend almost 90% of it back into the American economy that helps jobs here in America, where America does donate money to Egypt and Pakistan, and we don't get nearly that return. So I think, I wouldn't agree quite that Israel receives money without a huge American benefit versus other countries don't giving that to them.
Yeah, I agree that it's not the same. I don't know what the delta is, but I agree with you. I agree with the basic premise you're stating. Stephen, anything you want to say?
Just briefly, I think some of these defensive investments we've made in Israel have been in the U.S. interest. And just to your kind of broader point, Matthew, about JD Vance, some of his comments maybe catching up with him, I do think that might be an issue going forward, just because I think JD in his book that he's selling right now, he said he's been, what's the phrase? Basically, he's been, a victim of ambition or something like that. This is one of his faults, I guess, he's identified about himself. He's chased ambition. That might be the phrase. And look, that definitely tracks with the JD I've known over the years. And when you're constantly chasing ambition and saying things to advance your political or public career, some of those statements can catch up to you. And I'm sure they will if he runs for president.
I may have to quit my jobs and write a book about JD Vance. It's just so interesting how people see him. There's such a broad range, Matthew, thank you, including amongst, again, people like you two, who I totally respect and who have great, thoughtful insights about him. Boy, the range of views is quite something. This weekend is Father's Day. Being a dad has changed my life forever, and it's always on my mind how to be a good dad, and great stories about parenthood. But for me, fatherhood is, of course, a little bit more present for me. I'm a new episode of Next Up, available now as a podcast and on YouTube. Father's Day episode. Have my dad on as a guest and talk about what being a father was like for his generation versus for me. My son makes a little bit of a cameo. And then I interviewed my friend Leland Vitter. Leland wrote a book recently about his father's role in helping him overcome autism. And every time Leland and I talk about his dad, I cry. And so I do cry on this episode. Hopefully the clip we've chosen doesn't show me crying, just because you guys.
Mark, I've had trouble downloading it.
Don't have the clip? Is that what
no,
you're
no, never mind. Do we have it?
That's all that buildup.
I was diagnosed. My parents had been told they needed to have me evaluated. So they took me to this medical office building, linoleum floors, bad furniture, stale coffee. We've all been in those rooms, and you can kind of smell the fear of the perspiration of people who have been in there. They waited. There were probably some old magazines to flip through because this was long before cell phones. And the woman brought me back, and she said, he's got 3 big issues. He's got behavioral issues. If somebody looks at him the way he doesn't like, he'll turn around and slug them. So forget, play dates or birthday parties or anything like that. I was completely socially isolated. I had big sensory issues. If I had on, shoes I didn't like or a shirt or jacket, I would melt down. And big learning disabilities. So I had what they call an IQ point spread. 20-point spread between the 2 halves of your IQ test is a learning disability. I had a 70-point spread. And she said it is very difficult to understand what's going on inside his mind. And what's interesting when you kind of look back is how it seems like my dad had all the answers. And certainly Born Lucky is a story of him devoting his life to me. He will tell you he did not, and how scared he was through the whole process. And I think that is what has resonated with so many fathers who've written saying they don't feel alone.
Leland's dad would sit and cry every night as he dealt with this. Anyway, watch the interview, buy the book, and I hope you enjoy the Father's Day episode of my show. Gentlemen, thank you for being here. Very grateful to you. Steve, where can people see your stuff?
Yes, and by the way, Leland's book, I read it. Absolutely fantastic. I recommend it very highly. CortesInvestigates.com, Cortes with an S at the end, CortesInvestigates.com, all my content. Thanks.
Stephen, remind everybody, besides seeing you Thursdays with your colleagues on the group chat, where they can see your stuff.
Yes, just follow on at Stephen Olikara. You'll see all the different media and political things that I'm doing there. But yeah, it's a good reminder. Tune in on Thursdays for the group chat. Always a good time.
Yeah, it's a great show. Thank you all for being part of the two-way community. Another great week here, and I'm so grateful for what we're all building together, and for Alan and Professor Kenny for the community shows that they do, and for all of you for watching and participating and being part of it. And Steve, we'd love to have you back. Just incredible content and genius. And thanks to my colleagues for another great week. And barring massive breaking news that'll force me on the air over the weekend, we'll see you Monday morning, 9 a.m. Eastern time for the morning meeting. And please, if you haven't listened to the new episode of Next Up or watched it, please do. Have a great weekend, everybody. And Stephen, thank you both.